The police radio crackled, cutting through the quiet of the lobby. Active assault. Suspect female pregnant armed with a kitchen knife. All eyes turned toward me. Me sitting calmly with a lukewarm coffee, watching my sister scream into an empty room on my phone. I wasn't at the scene, but the chaos was real. Have you ever been falsely accused or watched someone you trust twist the truth for their own gain? Imagine that tension, that disbelief, because that's exactly where I was. You have to go back a few hours to the cake, a $450 extravagance layered with raspberry filling and wrapped in edible gold leaf, the kind of thing I never would have chosen. But my mother insisted on for appearances. I barely had a moment to appreciate it before Clara, my sister, erupted. She didn't just ruin it, she annihilated it. She stood in the middle of the rented restaurant hall, a serrated knife trembling in her hands, breathing, hard eyes wide and frantic. Guests froze phones up, recording the spectacle as fondant and cream were smeared across the polished floor. But Clara wasn't looking at the mess. She was looking at me, screaming that I had stolen her life, her luck, her future. "You take everything," she shrieked, lunging toward me with that knife. I stumbled back instinctively, hands covering my belly. Before I could react further, a hand clamped onto my bicep. It wasn't to pull me away to safety, it was to hold me in place. My mother's grip was bruisingly tight. "Calm down, Elle," she hissed, and I realized she wasn't rescuing me. She was a part of the performance, restraining the pregnant woman while the other advanced. I glanced at my husband Justin, standing 3 feet away, pale and sweating but not intervening. He didn't move to shield me. He was watching Clara with a strange, terrified intensity. In that instant, fear dissolved into clarity. I am Elle, 29 years old, a forensic accountant for the past 5 years. I don't see panic in people, I see calculations. And the math of this room was finally adding up. Clara's eyes weren't wild with mental collapse. They were desperate, the same desperation I've seen in executives who know an audit is coming. After embezzling company funds, then I saw Justin, not at Clara, not at me, but at her purse sitting on the table behind me. 2 days ago, I had found an incomplete home equity loan application in his briefcase, $120,000 of our house's equity waiting for his signature. I had waited seeing if he'd ask. He hadn't. And now it clicked. This wasn't about the cake or even me. They didn't want to hurt the baby. They wanted me declared unstable. If I reacted, emergency power of attorney could be leveraged to sign that loan, drain the equity, and cover whatever debts Clara had wrapped Justin into. It was a financial maneuver disguised as a domestic catastrophe. I said quietly, but with lethal precision, "Let go of me." My mother blinked, surprised at my calm authority, and her grip loosened. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I stepped back, smoothing my dress over my belly, projecting a controlled image. I looked at Justin, then Clara. They were expecting the performance of panic hysteria, any reaction that could be cited in a police report they were preemptively imagining. Instead, I gave them nothing. I refused to play their game. The ride back to the house was suffocatingly silent. Justin gripped the wheel white-knuckled. My mother sat in the back, with Clara cooing over her as if she were a wounded animal, rather than the orchestrator of an assault. They believed they were escorting me to my downfall. In reality, I was waiting for the venue change for the moment when I could turn their own calculations against them. The hall, the cake, the knife, the restrained chaos, all of it was a setup. Yet, as I observed as the forensic mind in me traced each motive, each desperation, the pieces aligned perfectly. Clara wasn't hysterical. She was a calculated player. My mother wasn't protective. She was a facilitator. Justin wasn't supportive. He was a tool. And in that realization, I found the clarity to step back, to see through the emotional storm and understand the numbers behind the theatrics. I wasn't just surviving the scene, I was mapping it, recording it, and preparing to outmaneuver it. As I watched the chaos unfold, everything suddenly snapped into focus. Clara's frenzied movements, her accusations, and the knife poised in her hands. It wasn't random anger or a hormonal breakdown. It was a calculated performance, a carefully choreographed attempt to manipulate the situation. Then I noticed Justin standing, frozen, not intervening, but fixated on her purse. That was the missing link. 2 days earlier, I had stumbled upon an application for a home equity line of credit in his briefcase. $120,000 of our house's equity sat there incomplete because it needed my signature. I hadn't said anything, waiting to see if he'd act. He hadn't. And now it made sense. If I were declared unstable, if I reacted in panic or fear, emergency powers could be leveraged. He could coerce the signature and the money would be gone before I even realized it. The anger, the performance, the staged assault, all of it pointed to one goal: liquidate assets through a perceived mental collapse. I took a deep breath, letting the realization settle. My family wasn't acting out of malice for the moment. They were acting like accountants with a ledger, with risk and reward in mind. Clara's eyes weren't mad, they were calculating. My mother's grip wasn't protective, it was strategic. Justin wasn't scared or caring. He was cornered, reliant on their plan working. The room wasn't filled with emotion, it was filled with transactions, numbers, motives, and stakes. In that instant, I understood my only advantage. If I remained calm, refused to give them the reaction they were counting on, I could control the outcome. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I slowed my breathing, forced my shoulders to slump, widened my eyes to mimic old panic attacks, just enough to seem vulnerable. But I held the true measure of control beneath it all. I let the moment stretch, letting them fill in the story with their assumptions, giving the illusion they were in charge. Their plan relied entirely on my response, and by withholding it, I disrupted their calculations. I realized then that understanding the scheme was half the battle. By seeing their moves as transactions rather than personal betrayals, I could navigate the deception without losing my composure. Every gesture, every word, every expected reaction could be met with subtle manipulation, carefully calibrated to mislead without escalating. This was a chess game disguised as family drama, and for the first time I wasn't a pawn. I was observing the board, anticipating their moves, and preparing to respond on my own terms. In that clarity, I found both power and safety, choosing deliberately not to play into the trap they had laid before me. The drive back to the house was stifling. Justin's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his face tight with tension, while my mother sat in the back, cooing over Clara as if she were tending to a fragile animal rather than the architect of the earlier assault. Silence hung thick between us, each of us, pretending a different story, but I knew the truth. I was waiting for the next stage, the real performance, and I had to play it carefully. As we entered the living room, the ambush began. Clara flung herself onto the sofa, sobbing with a precision that was almost artful. "I don't feel safe," she wailed, eyes fixed on my stomach. My mother's voice, dripping with feigned concern, soothed her, rubbing her back while sending a calculated glance in my direction. The words were rehearsed. Oh, we need to talk about your mental state. Justin says you've been forgetful mood swings. For the safety of the baby, we need to get you some help. A 72-hour observation, a psychiatric hold, this was the plan, the trap they had designed down to the smallest detail. I forced a shallow, quickening breath, widened my eyes. Just enough, letting a hint of past panic seep through, but underneath every nerve, every thought, was focused. I was calm, measured, watching their moves as if from a distance. The wider my eyes, the faster my breaths, the more they filled in the narrative they were expecting the hysterical, unstable pregnant woman. But none of it was real panic. I let them believe they were executing their plan flawlessly while I remained in full control. Clara's sobs intensified her head, dropping into her hands. My mother's voice, the guided, coaxed and framed my reactions, cementing the illusion. Justin's gaze stayed cast downward, carefully. Avoiding my eyes, part of the scene's choreography, I matched their expectations just enough. Trembling hands, shallow breaths, stammered words, but each cue was deliberate, each motion calibrated to maintain their false sense of control. Every gesture, every word, every stifled breath was a performance layered over a core of complete composure. They believed they were in charge, orchestrating events, and I let them. I refused to scream or cry, refusing to give them the reaction that would validate their plot. In the silence between sobs and soothing words, I was calculating, planning, and observing. Their scheme relied entirely on my response, and by giving them the illusion of vulnerability, I guided the narrative without ever surrendering control. By the time the moment stretched long enough, I knew I had successfully disrupted the trajectory they had intended. The 72-hour hold, the police report, the justification for my removal from the house, all of it was waiting for a reaction I refused to provide. In that tense, quiet theater of fear and deception, I remained the only one truly in command. I let the moment stretch, just long enough for their concern to feel convincing. My breathing stayed shallow, my words uneven, like someone trying to hold themselves together. Then I backed away slowly, letting my voice tremble. I told them I needed air, that I couldn't breathe in the house right now, that I needed to pack a bag and stay somewhere else for the night. Justin looked up immediately, alarm flashing across his face. "Go where?" he asked. I shrugged helplessly, clutching my chest. "I don't know. A hotel, somewhere quiet. I just need space." Across the room, my mother and Clara exchanged a quick glance. This wasn't their exact plan, but it worked well enough for them. If I left voluntarily, they wouldn't need doctors or paramedics. They'd have the house, my files, my devices, my life sitting right where I left it. My mother nodded, slowly, slipping back into her soothing tone. "Maybe that's best," she said. "Go pack a bag. We'll stay here with Justin." Perfect. I hurried down the hallway to the nursery. The moment the door closed behind me, the trembling stopped. My hands were steady now, calm, focused. I grabbed a duffel bag and started tossing in random clothes. Shirts, a sweater, a pair of shoes. Nothing organized. Nothing that looked deliberate. It had to look like a frightened woman grabbing whatever she could reach. Then I moved to the back of the closet and reached behind a stack of storage boxes. My fingers found the cracked iPhone I had hidden there weeks earlier. An old backup phone I had kept charged for another investigation entirely. I powered it on and opened the streaming app. The screen dimmed immediately as I lowered the brightness all the way down. Audio and video trigger activated. Silent recording, live feed. Next, I walked over to the dresser where a vintage ceramic owl lamp sat watching over the crib. I tilted the base carefully and slipped the phone inside the hollow body. There was a small chip in the ceramic, something I'd noticed months ago but never fixed. Now the camera lens lined up perfectly with that opening. From that angle, it could see everything. The crib, the changing table, the closet, the doorway, the entire room. I stepped back and checked the angle on the screen. Wide enough, clear enough. If anyone entered the nursery and I knew they would, I would see it. I zipped the duffel bag closed, forcing my shoulders to sag again as I walked back into the living room. The fear returned to my voice like flipping a switch. "I'm leaving," I said quietly. "Please, just don't follow me." Clara gave a small smile she tried to hide. She thought she had already won. They all did. They believed I was fleeing the battlefield. I walked out the front door, climbed into my car, and drove away. But I didn't go to a hotel. 3 minutes down the road, I pulled onto a quiet side street and parked. Then I opened the feed on my dashboard screen. Back in my house, the nursery lights flicked on, and the show began. Sitting in the lobby of the police station, I let the world blur around me. The hum of fluorescent lights, the occasional bark of a radio, the faint scent of coffee. All of it faded into the background as I focused on the small screen in my hands. The live feed from the nursery showed every detail of my house in perfect clarity. From here, I wasn't just observing. I was controlling the narrative without anyone knowing. My family was performing, but I was the director. Back at home, Clara and my mother tore through the nursery. Drawers yanked open, clothes thrown onto the floor, the crib mattress overturned. It wasn't random chaos. They were searching for a red folder, the one that held the financial documents, the ledger of everything they needed to control me. Clara's voice rose and fell in carefully calculated desperation, but I saw through it. This wasn't fear. It was strategy, an attempt to manipulate both her mother and my absent participation into a pretext for action. Every frenzied motion was intentional, choreographed to create a sense of urgency and instability. My mother's voice, cut through, clipped, and commanding. "Check the closet again. If we don't find those papers, we can't get the notary to sign off." She sounded panicked, but the tone was practice rehearsed. She wanted the scene to appear believable, convincing me or anyone else watching that I was the unstable one, but I knew her moves as well as I knew the numbers in an audit report. And then there was Justin. I watched him frozen near the doorway, useless in appearance, his hands hovering over his phone. Every now and then he glanced at Clara, anxiety pressing at the corners of his eyes. Then the screen on his phone caught my attention, a notification from a sports betting app, followed by a text from an unsaved number. "Payment due by midnight. Don't make us come to the house." His desperation was the missing variable, the hidden thread in their otherwise polished scheme. The stakes weren't just my sanity, they were his financial survival. He needed Clara's plan to work because he had gambled away our safety net. The realization sharpened my focus. Every action, every pause, every faux panic they displayed depended on my reading of their needs and timing. Clara froze mid-motion, eyes darting between her mother and the clock on the wall. "Fine," she said finally. "Option B, we don't wait for the doctors." She moved to the changing table, picked up a small paring knife I had left behind, and sliced a shallow cut into her forearm. Blood welled immediately, and my mother reacted instantly. grabbing a towel with grim precision. The scene was perfect. To any outsider, it was real. To me, it was exactly what I expected. Clara's voice transformed as she dialed 911, crying into the phone. "Help me. She has a knife. She's trying to kill the baby." Justin backed into the corner, playing his role silently. The tableau was immaculate, a perfect illusion. And yet from the police station, I could see every twitch, every hesitation, every micro-expression. The fear was fake, the urgency staged, the chaos orchestrated. But the desperation in Justin's eyes, the real pressure he was under, was genuine. I sipped my coffee, letting the adrenaline build. Each second of their unraveling, each frantic search and manipulated panic reinforced my clarity. I wasn't a victim in this theater. I was an observer, a strategist, and soon the one who would write the final act. The house was theirs for the taking, or so they thought, but I had already set the terms of the game. Every move they made fed the narrative I controlled, every misstep revealed the truth, and every calculated panic made the outcome inevitable. In high definition on that small screen, I watched the scheme collapse on itself, one frantic gesture at a time. When the police had left and the house fell into an uneasy silence, I knew the final act was approaching. Justin moved closer, pretending to process the chaos, his hands trembling slightly as he offered tea. I took it, letting him think the moment had passed. But I wasn't finished. I had seen everything through the nursery fee, the wire transfer, the desperation, the calculations. I let him settle for a heartbeat before I asked calmly, "Did you enjoy the honey pot?" His face froze instantly, the smile vanishing as he realized I knew. "The transfer," I continued. $120,000. Did it go smoothly?" He tried to stammer to explain, but I cut him off. "No," I said, holding up my phone. "You just committed federal wire fraud using my credentials. Anything over $5,000 reroutes automatically to escrow and logs the device. I flagged that account weeks ago." The color drained from his face as he understood the trap had already been sprung. I handed him an envelope. Divorce papers, full custody, the house, everything. "You leave with your car and your debt," I said. "Sign and go tonight." He tried to argue, tried to claim he acted for my protection, but I didn't waver. The consequences were immediate, undeniable, and precise. He signed. I locked the door, revoked his access from the smart home app, and watched his status flip to access denied. The house felt instantly lighter, quieter. The air cleared. I poured the tea down the sink, washing the mug methodically, reclaiming each small act of normalcy. And then I moved into the nursery, stopping the burner phone recording and backing it up 3 times. I replaced the stuffed bear in the crib, a small gesture of order and closure. Sitting in the rocking chair, hand on my belly, I allowed myself to breathe fully for the first time. The front door on the monitor stayed locked. For the first time, I knew exactly who was outside, and they couldn't get back in. Every move, every manipulation, every frantic gesture from the past hours had led to this clarity. The threats, the schemes, the deception, all neutralized by patience, observation, and precise action. In that quiet, controlled space, I reflected on the resolution. It wasn't just about regaining control of the house or protecting the baby. It was about reclaiming agency, exposing the calculated maneuvers of those I had once trusted, and enforcing boundaries that would ensure safety. Each decision was deliberate, each consequence enacted, with the clarity of understanding the stakes fully. The game was over, but the lessons remained vivid. I had navigated the deception, anticipated the moves, and emerged not just unscathed, but firmly in command of my life, my home, and my future. The house finally settled into silence, each lock secured, each device under my control. I sat in the nursery, hand resting on my belly, feeling a rare sense of clarity and safety. The chaos had passed, and the manipulations of those I trusted were laid bare. It's a reminder how vigilance, awareness, and careful observation can protect what matters most. Trust is fragile, and family dynamics can be deceptively complex. Take a moment to reflect. How well do you know the intentions of those around you?